We'll pop out a best bet at the very end of the program. It's a lot of deliberating for yours truly to isolate that numero uno one, and we are perfect. We don't want to screw anything up here. 5-0 on the best bets. Now that I've just pumped it up, we'll probably not continue that streak because I shouldn't mention it, but yeah, we are 5-0. No, I'm somewhat kidding. I think we'll do well this week. I feel good about the week. We'll start with this Mahomes one at plus 270, and Patty is taking matters into his own hands these days in terms of running with the ball because they don't really have much of a running game with Pacheco and Kareem Hunt trying to work in Rashard Smith. He ran for 60 yards last week with a touchdown. He didn't do it for 2 games, but in 3 of his 5 games, I mean, he's running all over the place. It's like Forrest Gump out there. 60, 66, and 57. And you look at commonalities between these defenses, I don't see a ton here, but actually some man coverage, and that's what he'll see. The Lions run man at a pretty high clip. It's like, let's see here, top 5. So we're going to get man coverage, maybe even 40% of the time. That's a pretty big number. And of course, that's always good for the rushing production. And by the numbers, the Detroit Lions give up the 4th most schedule-adjusted fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks on the ground. So they have done actually a pretty good job of adjusting their scheme to account for these running quarterbacks because there was a time when they were getting absolutely crushed by guys like Lamar Jackson and Justin Fields. This is a little different. Mahomes isn't like that, but he will take off 4, 5, 6 times. So I do like that one right there. Now, the Jamar Chase news, did not know that he popped up on the injury report with an illness, but I still go with it because it's plus 195, and that's certainly a good number. They will likely throw the ball with Bro Flacco. They can't run it, so it's not been a good year for T. Higgins, quite frankly. And, I'm not that worried about the matchup per se for Chase, but it is a better matchup than it is for T. Higgins. T. Higgins is the guy that you want to start against a man-heavy defense, and Chase is the opposite. And the Packers are not man-heavy; they're zone-heavy. Off the top of my head, I would venture to guess that they play zone. I'm going to guess at like a top 7 clip, and so that would be good for Mr. Jamar Chase. I can actually look it up live here while I'm on the air. Where are they in terms of the zone? They are, of course, I can't find it. Of course. Trust me, they're up there in terms of zone coverage. I can never find something on the spot when I have a million things to look at. But Jamar Chase, check the status. Maybe wait if you want. If you're worried about the illness, maybe check on the status till Saturday and get in on it. Maybe the odds, maybe they improve. Who knows? But plus 195, I thought was pretty good. It's not as good as this one, even though this isn't a huge number, but the opportunity for Hassan Haskins, I do believe, is very good at plus 150. I always kind of go back to when I interviewed Hassan Haskins at his combine and asked him about scoring 5 touchdowns against Ohio State for Jim Harbaugh. And he was all about it, and it was all about the rivalry game. As you could not have come up with a better time to have a big game if you're a running back for the Michigan Wolverines. We'll get into the touchdown first. Plus 150. I almost lost my train of thought. Plus 150. Hassan Haskins has been the number 2 over Kamani Vidal behind Marion Hampton, who of course is out. I think people might be a little confused by that because it was Vidal who came in late in the game. That was a negative game script. So I do think that Haskins is the guy. And it's a great matchup. I mean, come on. Look how good this team made Rico Dowdle look. I thought Rico Dowdle looked incredible last week. Their tackling is horrific in Miami. And again, Dowdle ran for 200. He looked like a 7-time All-Pro, a future Hall of Famer, if you will. Miami is the NFL's second most extreme run funnel by pass rate over expectation. They give up the second most adjusted yards, second most schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to opposing running backs on the ground. They give up the 15th most adjusted yards before contact, so they're kind of middling there. But they're giving up 5.6 yards a carry, second most rushing yards per game. If Haskins can't get to 34 yards, I would be absolutely stunned in this one. By the way, back to the tutty, Mr. Touchdown set a single-season program record with 20 rushing touchdowns back in 2021. Of course, that record was then broken by Blake Corum, but I do believe he's a good bet to score, and the horrific tackling should ensure we get to 34 damn yards. So those are the 3 touchdown props that I have on the board. So before we take another break, let me pop out a few more props that I'm going to be officially in on. How about Travis Hunter? We won that prop on Monday night, and we're back at 35.5 receiving yards with no Brenton Strange, and that's a big loss. He's kind of emerged as Trevor Lawrence's most reliable guy. He's got 5 grabs and 45 yards receiving, or 5 targets and at least 45 yards every game, except for the last game when he got hurt. So very good schematic matchup for Travis Hunter. Seahawk defense, top 4 in their usage of cover 4 and cover 6. Hunter actually leads the team in receptions and has nearly 3 times the receiving yards as any other Jaguar receiver against those 2 shells, including Brian Thomas Jr. They are allowing the 8th most schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to the slot. It's worth an additional 2 points if you're a slot receiver. Hunter, 66% of his slots or his routes out of the slot and his slots out of the route. They also give up the 9th most yards per route run and the 5th most receiving yards per game, 88, to slot receiver Sterling Shepard. Even got 4 grabs for 21 in this matchup. They're also might not have Devin Witherspoon again, and that's another big one. He was a DMP first 2 days of practice. So as you can see, we're stacking up all these positives, and there are like 4 of them. I think that nets us 36 yards, basically, for Travis Hunter. Next up, Cal Ridley. Our guy, Brett Whitefield, brought this up. I take my own picks. You know, I really don't piggyback off of anybody else. I would have come up to the same conclusion, quite frankly, doing the research yesterday and today. Raiders give up the 2nd most receiving yards per game, 3rd most yards per reception to outside receivers. They allow the NFL's highest target share to outside receivers. Great spot for Ridley. They're a top 3 pass funnel by pass rate over expectation. They're a deep funnel, having allowed the 8th most deep receiving yards per game. They use cover 3 at the highest rate, and Ridley sees a 13% boost to his targets per route run against cover 3, while Elik Ayamanor, the rookie, gets a 19% reduction. I mean, it's ridiculous. They are 23rd by time to throw adjusted pressure rate over expectation. They're one of the worst, slowest pass rushes in the league. This is massive for Cam Ward. No surprise last week. He was up against a non-pressure defense, and he had by far his best game of the year. And Ridley's production soars when non-pressured. So I love this. Calvin Ridley, over 44.5 yards. Next up, I'm going to go with DK Metcalf. I am a DK hater, so it's kind of an endorsement. Browns run the highest rate of cover 1. Oddly enough, DK has been bad against man, basically, seeing a 22% reduction to his yards per route run since the start of last year. But in previous years, he was the man against man. Now, maybe that's a sign that he's slowing down here, but I'm confident at the very least that we can get to 53 yards. Because the Browns are still giving up the 5th most schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to outside wide receivers. They give up the 3rd most to wideouts aligned on the left side, where he is more often than not. they just traded Greg Newsome. We talked about this matchup a couple of days ago. Well, they traded Greg Newsome, and now it's going to be Tyson Campbell, who I guess is set to start, and he just joined the team. And he's not good. He gives up plenty of production. So, and if it's Denzel Ward, we're good, because Ward gives up a very healthy 0.40 fantasy points per route run. I do believe that they will have to lean on Aaron Rodgers and his right arm, because this is the nastiest run defense in football. So I don't think the Steelers are going to run. They're going to have to use shorter passes in lieu of the run. DK Metcalf over 52.5 yards. Next up, we'll pop in an under. Breece Hall. We're going to get a little creative here. Under 101.5. Sounds like a radio station coming at you, 101.5. But we'll be under 101.5. Now, he does lead the league in explosive run rate. I actually won this prop last week pretty handily. Didn't totally trust the receiving end, so I'm like, you know what? Let's go with the rushing receiving, and that was an easy win. But Denver gives up the 9th fewest adjusted yards before contact, so it's not the best matchup. They do give up the 6th most receiving yards per game to running backs, so that's great. However, Isaiah Davis led Breece in route share last week, 43 to 35%. Breece also pathetically had 4 yards rushing on 10 carries in one game last year. Dude had 12 touches, and he turned that into 18 total yards. Nasty matchup. They held Saquon Barkley last week to 6 carries for 30, and he did make that big play on the wheel route, but he still didn't get to 101.5, did Barkley last week. So I will do the under there, trying to mix it up, trying to pop in some unders. We're certainly not going under on Jake Ferguson. That is for sure. We'll go over 45.5. I mean, I go up another yard or two. This is minus 125 on Fanatics, so you could probably get better odds for a little higher of a total, but we're stacking up positives here as well. Panthers top 5 pass funnel by pass rate over expectation. Cowboys have the 8th highest pass rate over expectation. Great schematic matchup for Dak Prescott, who targets Jake Ferguson on a team high 40% of the routes against cover 3, which the Panthers use at the 3rd highest rate. Carolina also giving up the 3rd most schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends, as Jake Tribby mentioned. Most receiving yards to the position, 6th most receptions. Darren Waller crushed him, 5 for 78 with a touch last week. Not the greatest schematic matchup for Jeanty, so I don't know if they run all over Carolina. And Georgie Pickens going to see a lot of J.C. Horn. So it all adds up to me. Jake Ferguson, a clock. Next up, Spencer Rattler. Let's go back to it. We won this last week, over 16.5. Pats give up only the 15th most schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks on the ground, but they haven't faced any real running quarterbacks until last week when Josh Allen got him for 9 for 53 on the ground. They use cover 1 at the 9th highest rate. They give up the 4th most fantasy points per dropback on when they're in cover 1. And Rattler's running lately. He's got 4 more rushing attempts in 4 of his last 5 games. Over the last 2 games, he's taken off a lot more. 6 for 21 with an 11-yard run. And then last week, 6 for 49, or the week before that, 6 for 49 with a 15-yard run. Taysom Hill is now here, but he had 6 carries for -1 yard last week. I think Rattler will take off and run a few times and get to 17. We mentioned Hassan Haskins, like the touchdown prop. Also love over 33.5 rushing yards for all the reasons I outlined earlier in the show. Next up, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Let's go over 69.5 receiving yards, 7+ grabs, 70+ yards in 4 straight. 6th in average separation score and fantasy points data, 9th in win rate. He's balling. Good schematical matchup for sure, based on the coverages. They run the 3rd highest rate at 2 high, and Amon-Ra averages a very fat 3.7 yards per route run against that look. Casey also plays the 13th most man coverage shell out there, and he does very well against that. He is third in fantasy points per route run among 125 qualifying wide receivers against man coverage. 2.5-point underdogs. They have injuries on the defense at corner with Arnold, so they're going to need him. Ashton, Jeanty over 73 rushing yards. Raiders are 4.5-point favorites, and this is all you need to know. Tennessee is allowing the third most schedule-adjusted fantasy points per game on the ground, and they greatly miss Devondre Sweat. So they're giving up the second most adjusted yards before contact. That's all Jeanty needs. And that's what's been the case the last 2 weeks, and he's hit the prop. Quinshon Judkins over 77.5, a little gutsy here. Steelers give up the 11th most rushing yards per game. They allow the 4th highest explosive rate to running backs, and they're not good on man gap concepts, and Jeanty's great. So that leads us to the best bet. The best bet is Rachaad White over 20.5 receiving yards. I'll go to 23 or 24. Kyron Williams got him for 8 grabs for 66 last week. 3 games against the Niners. He's caught 5 for 21, 6 for 28, 6 for 31. Niners are giving up the 6th most schedule-adjusted fantasy points per game to running backs through the air. They'll need them because no Chris Godwin. Rachaad White, your best bet. You are very welcome. We'll catch you Monday for another edition of Prop Points here on VSiN.
Thanks for watching, but don't let the betting insights end here. If you want an extra edge this football season, you can get a month of VSiN Pro right now absolutely free. That means access to our betting insights, analysis, and tools like our betting splits at 0 cost to you. Click the link in the description to sign up.